Welcome back to Oral Medicine Simplified. In this final wrap up of our Oral Leukoplakia series, we are going to bring everything together through one central idea. Leukoplakia is not just a white patch, it is a map of risk. Throughout this series, we discussed definition, diagnosis, biopsy, dysplasia, management, and follow up. But today, I want you to remember leukoplakia clinically. When a patient comes with a persistent white lesion, our job is not only to name it, our job is to understand where it is, how it looks, what it may represent biologically, and how we can protect the patient over time. So, this lecture is not just a revision, it is a clinical framework for diagnosis, biopsy, and long term management. The first principle is very important. Not every white patch is leukoplakia, but every persistent white patch deserves respect. Leukoplakia is a clinical diagnosis of exclusion. That means we should not diagnose leukoplakia simply because a lesion appears white. First, we ask, can this be rubbed off? If yes, then consider superficial debris or pseudomembranous candidiasis. Second, can this lesion be explained by a clear cause such as trauma, friction, inflammation, or a sharp tooth? Third, does the lesion carry risk? If the white patch is persistent, unexplained, and cannot be placed into another definable category, then we begin to think of leukoplakia. This is why leukoplakia is not a lazy label for any white lesion. It is a diagnosis that requires thinking. When we see a white oral patch, we must filter the noise. The first shoot in this diagnostic funnel is whether the lesion can be scraped off. If it can be wiped off, then candidiasis becomes an important possibility. The second shoot is trauma. A sharp cusp, a broken restoration, a chronic cheek biting, they all can produce a white lesion. The third shoot is whether the lesion is bilateral and symmetrical, because that may suggest oral lichen planus or lichenoid reaction. The fourth shoot includes systemic or viral causes, such as hairy leukoplakia or lupus related lesions. Now, only after passing through this diagnostic funnel, when the lesion remains persistent and unexplained, then we arrive at a risk pool where leukoplakia becomes clinically relevant. And remember, calling a lesion non-scrapable does not automatically make it leukoplakia. It simply means that we must investigate further. Now we move from diagnosis to risk. Oral leukoplakia is seen globally and it is more common after middle age, especially after the age of 50. But we should never assume that a lesion is low risk simply because the patient does not fit the classic demographic profile. Risk is not determined by age alone. The site of lesion matters greatly. Soft, thin, and mobile mucosa deserves careful attention. The lateral tongue, ventral tongue, floor of the mouth, and soft palate complex are clinically important areas because lesions at these sites may carry higher malignant potential. So, whenever you examine leukoplakia, do not only describe the color, describe the exact site. The location itself is part of the risk assessment. Next, we must understand the difference between fuel and fire. Tobacco, alcohol, and areca nut are important carcinogenic exposures. They can damage the oral mucosa and create chronic irritation and contribute to genetic injury. These are the fuel, but the fire is the genetic and epithelial alteration that may already be established within the mucosa. This distinction is important because many clinicians ask only about habits and then feel reassured if the patient does not smoke or use tobacco. That is unsafe. Some leukoplakias in non-smokers can be clinically serious. So yes, we must ask about tobacco, alcohol, pan, gutka, areca nut, naswar and other exposures. But absence of these habits does not remove the need for proper assessment. This slide summarizes the biological journey from exposure to carcinoma. It begins with carcinogenic exposure, then genetic mutation, loss of p53, loss of cell cycle control, clonal expansion, epithelial dysregulation, where we finally see the clinical visibility of a white patch, then we move to epithelial dysplasia, genomic instability, and finally malignant transformation. But the key point to note here is that the white color is not the disease itself. The white color is the clinical surface expression of an underlying biological alteration. By the time we see a persistent patch, the mucosa may already have undergone cellular and genetic changes. This is why we cannot judge leukoplakia only by how white or how thick it appears. The visible patch is only the top of the biological process. Clinically, we often divide leukoplakia into homogeneous and non-homogeneous types. Homogeneous leukoplakia usually appears as a uniform white plaque. It may be flat, thin, slightly wrinkled, or corrugated. It generally has a lower risk compared with non-homogeneous leukoplakia, but lower risk does not mean no risk. Non-homogeneous leukoplakia is more concerning. It may be mixed with red and white, nodular, verrucous, ulcerated, irregular, or speckled. The biological behavior may be more active and the risk of dysplasia or malignant transformation is higher. So, when we examine the surface, we are not just describing texture. We are reading clinical clues that help us decide urgency, biopsy site, and follow up intensity. Now, proliferative verrucous leukoplakia or PVL deserves special attention because it behaves very differently. PVL is usually multifocal, progressive, recurrent, can be present in non-smokers, and has a higher malignant potential. It may begin as a simple white plaque and later become verrucous, widespread, or aggressive. It is often seen in older patients and can occur even without the classic smoking history. The major clinical danger is that PVL may keep recurring despite treatment and has a higher risk of malignant transformation. So, if a patient has multifocal leukoplakia that is slowly spreading, recurring, or becoming verrucous, we must not treat it as simple single patch. PVL requires long-term surveillance, repeated biopsies, and specialist level management. So now we discuss about all the red flags that should push us towards immediate biopsy or urgent referral. If a lesion persists for more than 2 to 4 weeks after the obvious removal of any irritants, then it should not be ignored. If there is redness, especially erythroplakic or speckled changes, we should be concerned. If the lesion is non-homogeneous, thickened, nodular, verrucous, or folded, the risk increases. Ulceration or breakdown of the mucosa is another warning sign. High risk sites like the lateral tongue and floor of the mouth, they require a lower threshold for biopsy. Size also matters. Lesions larger than 2 centimeters deserve more attention. Multifocal lesions are also important because they may suggest field changes or a more complex disease process. Remember this line: biopsy is not just a procedure, it is the point where clinical uncertainty becomes the biological evidence. Now, clinical examination can raise suspicion, but it cannot diagnose the epithelial dysplasia. Dysplasia is a microscopic diagnosis. Under the microscope, the pathologist looks for architectural disturbances and cytological abnormalities. Architectural changes may include disordered stratification, drop-shaped retiridges, uh, premature keratinization, and loss of basal cell polarity. Cytological changes may include pleomorphism, hyperchromatism, enlarged nuclei, abnormal mitosis, and an increased nuclear cytoplasmic ratio. This is why biopsy is essential in suspicious lesions. A white patch may look simple clinically, but the microscopic picture may reveal dysplasia, and sometimes a dramatic looking lesion may not show severe dysplasia. So, clinical appearance guides us, but histopathology confirms the biological risk. So when dysplasia is reported, it may be graded as mild, moderate, severe, or carcinoma in situ. Mild dysplasia means the abnormal changes are mainly in the lower epithelial layers. Moderate dysplasia means that the disorder extends further upward. Severe dysplasia and carcinoma in situ show more extensive epithelial abnormality and demands more serious management. Many clinicians also use a binary system where lesions are classified as low risk or high risk. This can help decision making because the central question is that does this lesion require aggressive intervention or close monitoring? But we must remember that grading is not perfect. Biopsy site selection, sample quality, and interpretation all matter. That is why clinical judgment and histopathology must work together. Management of leukoplakia is not as simple as removing a white patch. There are limitations to every tool. Scalpel or laser ablation may remove or destroy the visible lesion, but if we destroy tissue without proper biopsy, we may lose the chance to assess dysplasia. Toluidine blue cytology and autofluorescence may assist in clinical evaluation, but none of them can replace biopsy. Chemoprevention has been studied, but no medication has become a guaranteed standard strategy to eliminate the risk of malignant transformation. This is the management paradox. We have tools, but the most important tool remains correct diagnosis, risk assessment, biopsy when indicated, habit control, and long-term follow-up. Now let us put the clinical pathway together. We begin with input variables, clinical presentation, lesion site, surface, appearance, risk habits, and biopsy results. If the lesion is homogeneous with no or mild dysplasia and is at a lower risk site, it may be categorized as low risk. And for this lesion, it can be managed with habit control, removal of irritants, monitoring, and follow-ups. If the lesion shows mild dysplasia but it is present in a high risk site or the patient has persistent habits, the risk category increases and closer follow-up or excision may be needed. If the lesion is non-homogeneous, shows moderate or severe dysplasia, involves high-risk sites, or has multiple warning signs, then management must be more aggressive, often involving excision, specialist referral, and close surveillance. The core principle is simple. A small lesion with severe dysplasia can be more dangerous than a large lesion with no dysplasia. This is one of the most important concepts in leukoplakia management. Excision can remove the visible lesion, but it does not necessarily remove the biological field of risk. The surrounding mucosa may already have genetic alterations due to long-term carcinogenic exposure or field cancerization. That means recurrence can occur. A new lesion can appear at a different site. Malignant transformation may still happen. This is why we should never give the patient false reassurance by saying that the lesion has been removed, so everything is permanently cured. A better explanation is we have treated the visible lesion, but we still need to monitor the mucosa over time. One field, many possible fires. This is the reality of oral potentially malignant disorders. So, as we conclude this oral leukoplakia series, I want to leave you with the clinician's mandate. First, counsel without panic. Do not frighten the patient, but do not dismiss the lesion. Explain that biopsy or follow-up is not because cancer is certain, but because safety is important. Second, document without assumptions. Photograph the lesion, measure it, record the site, describe the surface, and document the risk factors. The whole mouth matters, not just the visible scar or the patch. Third, follow without delay. A 3-month interval may be reasonable for low-risk lesions, but high-risk lesions require faster action and closer review. The final message is this. Treat the risk, not just the patch. Follow the patient, not just the report. Excision treats the lesion, but follow-up protects the patient, and that is the clinical responsibility at the heart of oral medicine. That brings us to the end of our Leukoplakia series on oral medicine simplified. We have discussed definition, diagnosis, clinical variants, risk sites, dysplasia, biopsy decisions, management options, recurrence, field cancerization, and long-term follow-up. I hope this series has helped you understand leukoplakia not only as an exam topic but as a real clinical responsibility. In the next lecture series, we'll move from white lesions to red lesions and we'll discuss oral erythroplakia, a less common but often more alarming oral potentially malignant disorder. Thank you for watching. Keep learning, keep observing, and always remember, in oral medicine, early recognition can change a patient's outcome.